what do you think? We'll talk about Lance, Lynn, and Gibson, but I think people would like me to maybe jump ahead and ask you what's next. He did say that he indicated they're still looking for a third starter in all likelihood, but where do you think that is most likely to come from? Is it someone on the market? Would the ideal guy be Sonny Gray? Is that feasible? Or do you expect maybe that third starter will come, a prominent third starter will come in the trademark? What do you think? Just assess it for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could come from anywhere, and it just hasn't revealed itself yet. And that's in part because, like, one of the most significant starters just got available today. And, it's not going to be a thing where Yoshinobu Yamamoto is available this morning and signs tonight. I don't think. And that's not the impression I got from anybody who knows, his plans or what he looks for. He wants to look around, and he's not closed off to where he's going to try to look. So I think that has a lot to do with what comes next, right, for the Cardinals. The Braves are reportedly interested in Sonny Gray. That is a clear and present challenger for him. One of the reasons why the Cardinals had interest in Sonny Gray, they've now satisfied with the addition of Lynn and Gibson in the sense that they wanted a guy who'd been around, they wanted a veteran, and they wanted certainty in innings. I think this is playing out in one of the ways that Mozeliak talked about with me and other reporters about a week or so ago, where he was saying if you can get those two guys who are going to give you innings, some kind of guarantee, then you can reach and see where it takes you. Now, what direction they reach, there's still a lot of directions they could go. Snell hasn't really been connected to the Cardinals too much, but, his 5 innings, 6 inning kind of, or less than 6 inning average looks a little different when you got, Gibson and Lynn following up and Miklasz following up in that rotation. It can take on a little different, feel of maybe having that pitcher who doesn't give the bulk innings, but man, sure does give some 5 to 6 great ones. So I think it's a really interesting spot they've put themselves in. And it's also, to be candid, a precarious one because they just haven't pulled either of those kind of deals off when you think about it.
No, that's right. And I listen. We know they need an elite starter to top off what they've already done. And you're so right to harken back to what Mo said. He was kind of telling us in a way, or hinting or dropping the hint in a way that if you take care of the innings part first, then you can kind of narrow your focus and go hard after something to top it all off. But Derrick, I got to say, I'm skeptical, really skeptical that they. Hypothetically speaking, like they would outbid the Atlanta Braves for Sonny Gray. And I'm also skeptical on the bigger name guys, Yamamoto, Snell. Your point about Snell is compelling, and I agree with it, but I'm just skeptical that they'll pony up the money. I got to see it to believe it. What about you? Do you think it's okay to be skeptical?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've described them many times, both here on the radio, but also to them, that sometimes my view is that they're fine climbing up the ladder to the high dive. They're even fine curling their toes over the edge. They just don't jump. They don't jump. They check out the view, and then someone pushes past them and cannonballs. They get up there. They make their play, but sometimes it's like they want to be taken by the pitcher, not go out and take the pitcher. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They want to be told, like, how much the pitcher wants to be a Cardinal. They don't want to go, well, here's how much we want you to be a Cardinal. And that's where they're at in this marketplace now. They got 2 guys who wanted to be Cardinals. Lance Lynn, eager to be a Cardinal, happy to be close to home. Kyle Gibson, don't know how many times the Cardinals and him have talked about him becoming a Cardinal, but it's a lot. And they've tried to trade for him before. It's a lot. He lives here in the offseason. He's a Mizzou kid. There were all these reasons why they've lined up with him, Bernie, and he wants to be a Cardinal. It all fits for them, especially the short-term deals, which I also think are a fascinating part of this. when you put all that together, it's like the last part of it. Okay, they've paid for innings, and it'd be really kind of hypocritical of me after all these years of saying, where are you going to get your innings? Now that they have their innings, to not acknowledge that. They got their innings.
That's right.
These guys have been durable, reliable, nearly 400 innings from the two of them last year, more than 30 starts, consistently cranking out starts. And Kyle Gibson, he gave up, the most hits in the league last year? Yeah, part of that is, and I'm not saying that that's great or that's the stat that you want, but that comes with a lot of innings, and that comes with a lot of innings in the American League East. So that's a pretty impressive season, especially when year after year after year for the last 3 years we've been like, where are you going to get your innings from? They got that question. Okay, so now the next one. All right, you got the pass on the alley-oop. That's what they needed. They needed a good pass, the alley-oop. Can they dunk it?
Derrick, and I actually like the Gibson move a lot. I mean, when you consider there was a 101-win team, and I know they had a really good offense. I know that, but they're 20. They were 20-13 when he started. He led them in individual wins. I mean, led them in innings, led them in starts. He was a great leader. There's so many testimonials about him, and I said earlier, if you don't mind me sharing this, I said earlier, I think Kyle Gibson, and I talked about this last week, I think he's better than people assume. Mm-hmm. The last two, here's the stat. The last two seasons, there are only 16 starters in the majors who have the combination of at least 359 innings and a fielding independent ERA of 4.20 or better. He's one of the 16. So this isn't just a marginal guy. That combination of innings and pretty decent quality, it's not easy to find. I think people assume there's a lot of guys like that, and the answer is, the truth is, there really is not got a lot of guys like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, there's not. I mean, innings are so valuable, and I can't, innings from a middle rotation guy brings so much balance to a team that wants to be a contender. And teams that don't get them, you can look back on their schedules. They're the teams that, a lot like the Cardinals last year, where they scramble to cover innings, they leave their bullpen vulnerable, it splits, they can't get the one start that they need that goes 7 innings, they can't even get, the quality start, the 4.5 ERA, they just can't, and it creates this cascade effect where they then tumble into a losing streak. I think you and I have discussed it. Fans can go back and look at it. Cardinals really pushed to win a series at Coors Field, and then they split with the Pirates, and then they struggled the next week, and then became this slow drain of innings that eventually caught up with them. What a different world they're in if they come out of that Colorado series like a team that has a strong number 3 or 4 and goes, all right, we're getting 7 from that guy that day. We know it. We know we can do that. And that just brings balance to a team, and it allows them to push through one game to win because they know they're going to get the innings the next day, instead of constantly playing at an innings deficit. And that's what the Cardinals spent most of last season, is playing at an innings deficit. It was impossible. It was like, it was like credit card debt. They just could never pay it off.
Was there? I was unable to listen or monitor the John Mozeliak news conference today, and I know you will have comprehensive coverage on all of that later tonight. Or you already have some online, of course, at STL today.
I don't yet. No. I've been working.
Well, your earlier story, but I mean, you'll be updating that. Yeah, that's what I meant. I misphrased that. What were a couple or 3 things that you especially found interesting or informative from John Mozeliak today? Anything jump out at you?
Well, I mean, the fact that he returned to we're looking to add another starter, which would be the 3rd starter, which I know there's been a lot of hand wringing about and a lot of some misrepresentation and misunderstanding about. But I mean, he has seen 3 openings in the rotation, going in, and the talk today again about adding a third starter would make 3. So, I thought it was interesting that I asked him, if you're comfortable now with your innings base, you like your everyday lineup. In that same vein, where do you feel your bullpen's at? And he acknowledged that there were holes for the back end of the bullpen, and that is something that they're going to address at some point in time,
Right.
and not just with the trickle down from the rotation, to players now then in the bullpen who aren't needed in the rotation. For him to say like that there are holes out there, I thought that was candid and noteworthy. He could have just as easily said, "No, I'm comfortable with JoJo and Ryan and Gio. That's our group for late innings," but he didn't, and he did not. So and we could talk about the non-tenders. Those were somewhat interesting and revealing.
Sure.
But I think the bigger, I was really curious, and I asked about it, is the short-term nature of these contracts. There's a couple ways to read those. First and foremost is the obvious one, right? These are pitchers in their late 30s, right?
Sure.
I mean, that's kind of what it goes for. But there's another way to read that, and that's that the Cardinals and the RSN and the rights fees are a little volatile. Not a little, a lot volatile.
They are.
And they also think their ticket sales might be a little depressed next season until this team plays better to draw in fans. Those are the two biggest revenue streams for payroll. And so I wondered if the short-term nature of these deals, especially with team options that they can just walk away from, speaks to their need to remain financially flexible after this year. Like, they might spend this year, but, they have Paul Goldschmidt expiring at the end of this year. Now they have Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson. They got some other contracts they can walk away from. How much are they trying to make sure that if they have a year of limited revenue streams for either reason, they can pivot to a smaller payroll? I thought that was really fascinating. And the answer was that wasn't the case. Though they want flexibility, that's not the driving part of the strategy to have these short-term kind of maneuvers that they can move away from if their revenue streams are slowed significantly this year.
Derrick, you mentioned the non-tender list, which was with all the recent news, today's news or the last 24 hours. That one's kind of been moved to the side for now, but since you mentioned it, it's a great time to ask you.
Sure.
I think we all know that by non-tendering Andrew Knizner, that means there will be a place for Ivan Herrera, which is about
Right.
time. But was there anything about that, or was there anything about any other decision that may have surprised you or did surprise you?
Yeah, those are the two that I asked about. Was usually teams like to maintain depth at two spots, catcher and pitching. And the Cardinals had the flexibility because Herrera does have another option here. They could have maintained Knizner. And if Herrera doesn't win the job in spring, go with Knizner. Or if both of them play really well in spring, then trade Knizner, right? As teams are always looking for catching depth at spring training. But they chose not to. They chose in November to commit to Herrera as their backup. Part of it is Paez, the young pitch catcher that they added. They had to protect him for the Rule 5 draft. He was likely going to be taken in the Rule
Sure.
5 draft because he's a really gifted defensive player, and the Cardinals can even bring out more defense from him. To be honest, he was really a standout last spring. When he went one knee down and was able to really access and get better at framing. He worked with Jose Trevino of the Yankees, and just really changed his game to flourish as one of the top defensive catchers of spring, and that continued into the season. So Mo's point is that's where they feel they have depth now, is with him, because he is so reliable defensively. I think it's interesting that a team that's like, we need pitching, hadn't signed pitching, moves away from a guy who they know could at least give them innings and Dakota Hudson. And Mo's answer to that was, I think, probably more revealing than fans expect from him. And he just said that you had to make a change, almost like that decision was the jolt to not just be the same old team, which I find interesting.
Yeah, I find it interesting, and I guess I'm okay with that. I haven't thought about it much, but the last thing I want to do is also overhype maybe some pitchers down below, but I think we all agree Zack Thompson is someone they could turn to for a rotation need.
I've been accused of being a Zack Thompson honk, so that's.
I'm right there with you. I like him a lot. I mean, and. He could be a valuable piece next season in a lot of ways. But also, listen, we know Gordon Graceffo. I'm just going to give you a hypothetical thing. I'm not saying this is like a real thing that's going to happen, but Gordon Graceffo had a lot of people excited, including neutral, prospect evaluators, because of his velocity and his strikeout punch. And he was viewed to be a guy on a pretty fast track. And listen, his season last year was disrupted by an injury. He never really got into the groove, so to speak. But who's to say that a guy like Graceffo, won't be ready a couple, 3 months into the 24 season? So I guess Mo, I ain't speaking for him, but I assume that they want to, make sure they have a little room for some talent that they think is getting closer. And I understand that logic if, in fact, it happens, and if, in fact, they're being realistic about that.
Yeah, I think there still might be a place for Graceffo in the bullpen too.
That's right.
He has a strong, you don't have to squint to see Graceffo doing a Palante, where Andre Palante goes through the spring and wins the job because he has a different pitch, he has success, they like it, give him swing and miss, and they put him in the bullpen. You can see Graceffo pulling something like that, too.
Absolutely. Derrick, one more thing, and I know you're really busy. I've enjoyed your time and your conversation, as always, my friend. Just your thoughts on Mike Shildt getting the Padres job. As expected, they put it on hold because of the obvious death of their owner, and they wanted to be sensitive to that. But a 2-year deal, and the Padres are entering an interesting time. I mean, they're reducing payroll, so we're not really sure what to expect in terms of the team they'll go into the season with. But just generally speaking, though, your thoughts on Shildt getting another chance?
I think it's great. I'm happy that he gets another chance. I'm happy that I watched the press conference. That's what I was doing and kind of finishing up a story on him for tomorrow's paper or for the website. It's already up on the website because it went up while we were talking. But just listening to the press conference and hearing him talk about the second act and how he's ready for it. I remember that time. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of questions, obviously, and he was going through a lot of emotions too, as he's talked about in those weeks that followed up. His firing from the Cardinals, the only organization he wanted, or the only organization he knew, and he got fired from the job he thought was his dream job, and what heartbreak that was. And there the Padres were like, hey, are you interested in managing again? And he just was not in a good spot to do that. And it just was very clear, particularly over this past season, talking with him, that he was ready for that opportunity. And the question was, where would it come, or if it would come? And those are real questions for managers. How many chances do you get? Will there be another place that takes a look at you, or is the place that knew you best the only place you're ever going to get that chance? And so I'm heartened to see that the Padres went back to him. That those 2 years they grew together. If that makes actually, that's exactly what happened. That over the past 2 years in his work with the Padres, they grew together, and in a way that makes it a perfect fit. I also got a kick out of seeing the press conference again where he said, they're going to play with swagger and they're going to have substance. And, I honestly, I think it could be freeing for Mike Shildt to manage a place where he's not looking at the shadows that had that room before him, but gets to make it his own. He doesn't have the weight. He doesn't have the tailwind of history, but he also doesn't have that weight of history. He doesn't have the Cardinal greats looking back on him from that wall. And, in a way, he gets to chart his own place here, and I think that's fascinating. And I think it could be really good for him, and they got a talented team.
Well said. Yeah, well said. Absolutely. And I did read the story. It's great that it's online, so go to stltoday.com and read about Shildt getting the Padres managerial job. I like to quote
really quick aside, it also is good and about time and important that it absolutely, finally detonated any lingering questions or confusion from his departure here. Right. He found a team that he could work for, and that he was a manager, and there won't be what happened there? Well, what happened there was, he spoke his mind and was critical and was concerned, and the executives didn't share that. And right. He had a 1-year deal or 1 year remaining on his contract, and they're like, well, we're not going to wait this out. We don't need to. We don't see eye to eye. We're going to move on.
Right.
And that this clears this maybe for folks who, well, is that really what happened, or really what else? What hasn't we heard? Maybe this finally clears that up too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was actually pretty simple what happened, and you said it. I know I've talked about it a lot. This is one of the oldest things known to any place of employment. If you get into kind of a hearty, spirited debate about what you want or what you think as opposed to what management thinks, and you're going to push back, which is okay to push back, but at some point, if it doesn't, if there's no peace in the valley, you're never going to win that. I mean, and listen, I don't blame him for feeling the way he did, because he was a man that had strong ideas about what they should do. So there's no scandal here. I know people always think it's like some big dark reason. It's not at all. Not at all. The so-called power struggles happen all the time in Major League Baseball. Hey, Derrick, one more thing, and I'm sorry because I said that would be the last question. But I would be remiss if I didn't get your thoughts on Daniel Descalso becoming the bench coach. And we both know him pretty well and saw him and the way he went about his business. You think that's a good choice, or do you like the choice? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. I actually, in the press conference today, I appreciated that Mo explained a little bit the timetable, because I spent about more than 30 minutes talking with Daniel Descalso at the World Series, because he was with Arizona. We caught up. We talked about what he was doing. Talked about a trip he was just on with John Jay. We talked about how fascinating it was that core group of players, so many of them have found their way into some role back in baseball. I mean, that includes Alan Craig, who, by the way, could end up on Shildt's staff, by the way.
That's cool.
Yeah, Alan Craig is out there with the Padres. He works in their front office. He and Shildt have a good relationship. It could be that he gets pulled back onto the staff, or at least some kind of role where you see him in uniform again, which would be really interesting. But so Daniel and I were talking about all that, right? John Jay off with the Marlins, on his way to interview for the bench coach for the Cubs, all of it. And I was thinking, as I got word on Monday that he was coming, and then the kind of knowing the role but waiting for the title, if that makes sense. Wasn't quite sure how they were going to handle the whole thing, whether they were going to change titles or just go with the bench coach. And ultimately, they just went with the bench coach. But I was like, oh, man, good for him, poker face, to keep this, as we spoke for so long. But the Cardinals had waited to reach out to him until after that World Series was over with. So it kind of came up after that, and then kind of, the usual conversation, right? Is this the right fit? Does this work? Do you and Ollie, how do you feel? And then are you willing for the time commitment? He's got kids, obviously, so it's that old question, ready for all that time commitment. But I think it's fascinating. I've known Daniel and John Jay and that whole group for as long as they've been Cardinals. Wrote about him as a minor league when they were in minor leagues, covered him when they were in the majors. Daniel Descalso once pulled me aside during one of their celebrations there, one of their early ones with the Cardinals, and he asked me, he goes, "How many of these have you seen? Is this what always happens here?" I never forgot that. Never forgot that. Like, here he was in the middle of this celebration, and he asked me how many I had covered, how many I had seen, and was it always what the Cardinals did? Just a very aware guy, great, thoughtful baseball guy. You and I, like you mentioned, we talked to him a lot because of view of the game, particularly as he peaked as an everyday player with the Cardinals and then saw someone challenge him for everyday playing time, all of it. And I think it's a really fascinating I think it's a fascinating hire. I'm eager to see if he's just the latest or the next in the run of bench coaches who become managers. Now there are four of them in the National League. 4 of the 15 are former Cardinal bench coaches.
The Memphis Mafia, man, still together, but in different places, but making their way in.
Yeah, back together again. We can see it. It's just now. It's a race. It's a race between Daniel Descalso, and you can tell him I said it. If you talk to him, it's a race between John Jay and Daniel Descalso. Who's the manager?
That's right.
And then who
That's right.
The other one. We'll see.
Dark horse, Alan Craig. It's
Dark horse,
perhaps.
Alan Craig. That's right. And then David Freese from the top rope is the hitting coach or something.
I like it. Hey, Derrick, thanks, man. I know you're busy. Appreciate all your work. Appreciate your generosity of time. And people need to go to stltoday.com right now. There's stories up. There'll be updated stories later. Everything will be – you get a Ben Fredrickson column coming.
Yeah.
His Lynn column was great. I'm sure what he's going to write next is great. So stltoday.com. Just keep clicking it on tonight, tomorrow, and if there's any other news, that should be the first place you go. Thank you, my man.
Yeah, we'll just do a chat all day Thanksgiving. Does that sound good?
Yeah, we can.
Spend the holiday together.
We can. Why not?
We'll call it leftovers.
That sounds really good.
Some readers will call it stuffing, but whatever.
Yeah, that's. You're good, man. We'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll do it. Well, thanks a lot.
Right.
We'll happy
Congrats.
Thanksgiving to you and your family. You're the best. Thank you. Appreciate
happy
it.
holidays and congrats again, Hall of Famer.
All right, future Hall of Famer. Thank you. Derrick Goold definitely going to be in there, so just a matter of time. People keep asking me how I feel about this. I said, going to the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame. Number one, I think it's a great Hall of Fame because it recognizes everyone who deserves it or worthy of it, whether they're a big, huge star with a certain celebrity element. Whether it's them or, sort of really obvious Hall of Famers or people that are not obvious, not in terms of like from Kansas City to Columbia to St. Louis down to Springfield, where there's certain athletes like Adam Wainwright, for example, or all the other Cardinals have been inducted into this Missouri Sports Hall of Fame. Too many to mention, a bunch of them. And all the great athletes in Kansas City and all the great Mizzou athletes, but the Kansas City pro athletes are what I'm referring to, but they, as I mentioned earlier, and this is the part that really strikes me about this, why this Hall of Fame is so special, and I've said it, and I said it in my acceptance speech, it's the People's Hall of Fame. Just because, we have not heard of some of these people, that is irrelevant. That means nothing because they may be doing it in a small town. It could be somewhere, for lack of a better term, kind of in the rural areas. It could be just some small town in southern Missouri. It could be up there in northwest Missouri, whatever it may be. And they're not name recognition type inductees like from, every part of the state of Missouri. It's like you mentioned Adam Wainwright. Everybody knows who he is. These are people that aren't necessarily well known outside of their communities, but they're heroes in their communities, and they impacted lives in a hugely profound way. They've enriched lives because of their leadership or the way they whatever role they had in sports, which includes entire teams that won high school championships. Some of them were there Sunday, and I was really. I was really inspired by all of that. So this is the true People's Hall of Fame, and that's the reason why I'm really, really happy that they thought I was worthy of that. And the other thing is that, I think I appreciate this now more now than I would have maybe 10 years ago or so. I don't know how to explain that exactly, but it's kind of like, I'm still busy. I mean, I'm busy all the time, and I love to be busy. It keeps me going. But, maybe 10 years ago or so, I would have thought, well, this is nice, but let me get back to covering, I got to go on a road trip or whatever. Where you're just sort of in this mad rush all the time, living in the moment. I think now that I've had time on my own to kind of reflect on my career, which I think we all do if we've been doing something a long enough time. No matter what you do, you sort of reflect on what you've done and what you've experienced and what you've seen. The older I get, the more I do that. And it's really not only healthy, but it's gratifying. So I do believe at this point in my career and this point in my life, this Hall of Fame honor comes at the perfect time. So I just wanted to say that too. But Derrick Goold, he can plan on it. He'll be in there one day. He's one of the great baseball writers this town's ever had. There's no doubt about it.